back in episode 1 or somewhere thereabouts, I talked about why I set up my Lightroom catalogs with a template catalog, and I promised I would tell you why. So let me just show you real quick one of those reasons why I use a template catalog. So here on my screen, you can see I've loaded up a job, and I've built this job or this catalog based on the templates. And on the left, under my collections, you can see now I've got customer orders collection set already set up with all these subfolders that I can use when the customer places the order. I just put them in the proper folder, and that reminds me what sizes I need to order. The other reason, here's one of my other preset folder collections, and these have smart collections, meaning they automatically will gather images based on some criteria that I give it. And I've set this one up called ISO Finders. And what ISO Finder does is it looks at the metadata in the image and automatically groups them based on the ISO range of the image. So everything from 4 to 800 ISO is grouped into this folder automatically. Everything from 8 to 1600 is grouped in that folder, and so on. So I've already set this up as part of my catalog template. So that's there. So as soon as I load the images, they go into the proper folders automatically. So why is that cool? I don't know. It's just cool that you can do it, right? I mean, isn't that cool? No, really there is a practical purpose. The ISO Finder, for example, gathers all my images because I have certain noise reduction settings that I use in Lightroom based on how much noise is in the image. So I do less for a 400 ISO, more for 800, even more for 16 and 32. And the noise reduction in Lightroom is actually excellent. It's very good in this latest version, and so I use it quite a bit. It's amazing. So now, if I click on the ISO Finder 4 to 800 folder, right there, I have all 4 images. I just need to select those 4 images, switch to my develop mode, and then I use my noise reduction preset that I already have made for 4 to 800 ISO. I just click on it, and that applies it to all those images. Then I can open up the next folder, ISO 8 to 1600. There's 114 images in there. I will select all the images and just click on the preset for 8 to 1600. Right. Boom, I clicked on it. Now it did the proper noise reduction for that ISO range automatically on all 116 images. So it's a quick way to apply certain presets that you know you want to a range of ISOs. There's all kinds of things you can set up automatically for it to find for you, and that's just one of the ones that I use all the time. And now, because it's a template, I don't have to rebuild all those folders, those smart collections, every time I start a new catalog. And that's what I'm talking about, all right? So, that's that. Let's move on to something bigger and better. All right, we have an image here that I talked about at the end of my last episode that we were going to tweak in Photoshop. So in Lightroom, I brought the image in and applied my default preset to the image already. And this is a cool shot. This is one we did at this McMinimans Edgefield. I was telling you about this cool spa here in Bend, and it's the most beautiful place when you walk in. And it's got these great tiled and colored lights and open ceiling. The moon can shine through, and like stained glass windows and things. It's amazing. And it's also filled with steam. What does steam do? Messes up your images. As you can see, it's a little hazy, and you have to shoot pretty close to your subject. This was actually shot with just a flashlight, a dive light, shining right on my model, and another dive light behind the pillar in the background. You can kind of see that big bright light. That's just a big flashlight. So it's 2 flashlights that created this image, but you have to be kind of close to your subject when you've got steam or fog. Otherwise you just lose all clarity and you can't even tell what's going on. So right up close with a wide angle lens, brought it into Lightroom, and it's looking pretty decent as it is, but I do want to add a little more oomph to it. So what I'm going to do first of all is choose a preset, and one of my vintage presets might be nice. So I'll click on 65 Fastback, our vintage delish, and I like that look a lot. I do want to tweak the white balance. It's looking a little bit green to me, so I will just add in a little magenta with my magenta slider on the white balance section. And the other thing I want to do is to add some clarity to help reduce that haziness. So I'll bump the clarity slider up to about 57 on this particular image. And the last thing I'm going to do before I take it into Photoshop for further fun is to darken their hair. You can see it's a little washed out. It's not as black as it could be. So I'll use my favorite tool. Remember the shortcut for Kevin's favorite tool? K. Go to my adjustment brush, and I'm going to use contrast as the tool that I will paint with. Move my brush right over the top of his head and paint just a wee little bit there. And I'll go down on the top of her head onto her hair and paint my brush over that as well. So just richening it up a little bit, adding a little more contrast to those low contrast areas. All right. So we've improved it there. Now we need to go to Photoshop. Command or Control E to open the image into Photoshop. Remember that shortcut? Good. Okay, we've got the image now in Photoshop. What do we want to do to it? It looks pretty good, but we want it more dramatic, more artsy, more impressionistic. Remember the first thing that you do to an image in Photoshop? Fix the problems, right? So I'm going to fix this problem. These two lights here are distracting to me. These little lights under the water. I want to smooth them out or take them away. There's different ways you could do it, but one of my favorite tools is actually the content aware fill, and some of you may have used this. It's actually a great tool for patching things with a lot of detail with information from neighboring areas, and it works pretty well. It probably would work well on an image like this. So what you want to do is take your lasso tool right here and select the area that you want to replace. Make sure you select a little bit outside around it into the good stuff. All right, then here's a shortcut. Shift Delete brings up your fill dialog box, and use content aware as the option. And hit OK. Ta-da! Look, it's gone. It matched, even added some little water ripples in there. Pretty amazing. Better than the healing brush would do, because you'd have to find an area to match the texture behind it. So let's do that one more time right over here to this light and see what we can do to blend that out. Remember again, select a little more of the area into the good stuff as well as the bad stuff. Shift Delete. Content aware should still be selected if you used it before, and then all you have to do is hit Enter or OK. Now look at that. Ta-da! Made a beautiful patch, got rid of the distracting light. That's awesome, baby. There's one little spot right here I want to get rid of, so I'm going to select that. Shift Delete, Return. Gone. Cool. Okay. Now, what can we do to this image to make it more beautiful? Nothing. Nothing at all. No, there is something I can do. I'm going to add an enhancing layer. Remember we did the darkener layer before? How did we do that? I created a levels adjustment layer and changed it to multiply mode, and then inverted the layer mask, Command or Control I with the layer mask selected. And then I'm going to double click to the right of the name levels and focus that adjustment only on the shadows. So I take my slider on this layer blend if section to the middle, hold the Option or Alt if you're on a PC, and split those sliders again in half so it looks something like this, and click OK. So now I can take a brush with white at 100% opacity, paint on that mask with white because white reveals, and I will darken the darks. Now it's going to be too dark, remember that? It's too dark, but all I got to do is fade it. Fade it, fade it, fade it. Alright, so all I need is about 20%. That looks about right. Enrich it up. Now, let's add something new. We haven't done this yet. Let's add a texture to this image. And textures are a really great way to make an image feel more impressionistic, give it a lot of depth, make it feel vintage or an old film look. There's so many different things you can do. But I want to add a texture to this image. Now we have a tool called the Dashboard for Borders and Textures. But you can do it manually, and I'll show you how to do it manually. The dashboard just makes it faster and easier and gives you some preloaded textures already. But I'll show you how to do this manually. I'm going to go to the File menu and choose Place. I'll navigate to where I have a texture, select it, and the texture will be loaded onto the image. Now when you use place, it comes in as a smart object, and it'll fit to the width of your image. Now if you want to change that, no problem. I'll rotate it 90 degrees, and I will scale it by moving it to the top, dragging a corner handle, and placing it over the image at the exact size that I want, and then I'll hit enter on my keyboard. Ta-da! No, it's not quite done yet. Change the blending mode. Try overlay for a starter. Ooh, groovy baby. Huh? Overlay, you can also experiment with soft light or multiply to get different looks. For this particular one, I'm going to go with overlay, and what I want to do next is to take the texture away from her face. I've got this cool texture. It has these circles, concentric circles, looks like the water kind of vibrating away from her. It looks really groovy, but I don't want the texture on her face. I want it to be just in the water area and around the image, so I'm going to take it off of her face. So how are we going to do that? A couple different ways you could do it. First way is to use a filter and blur it with a Gaussian blur. And you're going to crank that blur up all the way and hit OK. And you're saying, well, Kevin, that took away all the texture. I wanted it only off of her. Well, smartly enough, we had a smart object because we placed the texture on top of the image. So a smart object lets you have smart filters, which come in as a separate layer, which I can then mask, just like I mask everything else. So if I invert that layer, Command or Control I block the blurring, bringing it back to the original, but I have this mask, just like I did with my other little trick below, that I can now paint with white anywhere I want to eliminate texture. All right, does that make sense? So now I'm eliminating the texture by simply painting with a white brush anywhere I don't want it. So I'm going to take it off of him, take it off of her, and leave it in the surrounding areas. Cool. There you go. So we've taken the texture away, but we've left the color because the texture actually adds a nice warm graduated color, which I like. I think it's really cool. I'm going to fade this entire texture layer back with my opacity slider to about 83%, because that's a special number for me, 83. You know what, if you can guess why 83 is special to me, I'll give you a prize on the Frame Show. Contact them, tell them the answer, you'll win a prize. So you like the texture gone, you like the texture on the outside, not on her. Maybe you want the color of the texture reduced. You like the feeling, you like the texture, but you don't want the color that it imparts. So here's another trick. I will take a black and white filter and apply that to the entire image, but you have to do it through the layers here. And then I'm going to hold the Option or Alt key down, clicking between the black and white and the texture layer, and that will clip the black and white, meaning make it only affect the texture layer, taking away the color, making it monochromatic. So you can see here's the texture without affecting the color, there's a texture adding the color. Got that? So I made black and white the texture only by clipping it to that layer. And then the groovy thing is you could take your opacity slider, slide it down, and bring back some of the color if you want. So that's what I'm going to do, right about there. Look good? Nice. All right, so you're thinking, I like it. It needs one more thing. How about a border? Yeah, it needs a border. So let's do this. Let's flatten the image. And I'll show you a couple of tricks for adding borders. First of all, I'm going to double click on the background layer and just hit enter. That makes it float. It's now a floating element instead of a solid black or solid background. Then I'm going to add a color fill with a solid color. And this is a layer that's basically the color. This will be your background. So choose a color like black and move it below the image in the layer palette. So it's kind of hidden right now. Then all I need to do is transform the image layer with Command or Control T for free transform. Hold your Option and the Shift key, Alt and Shift, and pull in a corner handle. Scrolled out of view there. Option, Shift, pull in a corner handle, and place that size that image anywhere you want on that black background. Something like that. Looks nice. Now you're looking at that and going, that looks great, but I want it to fill evenly, have a border that's even all the way around. Well, you know, math is not always our friend. Proportionally, I can't shrink the image when it's at a 2:3 proportion and still keep the exact same border width all the way around without changing my outer dimensions of the canvas. It's just not physically possible. We can mess with physics in Photoshop. And here's how you do it. I'm going to show you a cool trick. Take your lasso tool and make a selection around the really important stuff in the image. For example, the bride. We like her, we don't want to mess with her. So I'm going to make a little selection around the bride and groom. And then I'm going to go to the Select menu and save that selection. And I'm just going to call it her and hit OK. Now I can unselect, Command D. Now I'm going to go to my Edit menu and use Content Aware Scale. Content Aware Scale, similar to the transform, but it actually will let you protect certain parts of the image and it will stretch the other parts of the image. It's like magic. So I can keep her undistorted, untouched, and stretch everything else to fit. So check this out. So hold my Option or Alt on a PC key, grab the top handle here, and pull up or down, and check it out. It's stretching parts of the image, but I want to make sure that she's protected, right? So right here in the top it says Protect, and you choose her. You want to protect her. You're so chivalrous. Man in the pool, protecting your bride. Protect her. Now pull that handle up and down, and as you do, even if you go small, check that out. She doesn't change, everything else does. And now I can make that fit, hit enter to set the transformation, and it's good. Now, you want to add a little more to that? How about go to the Effects menu, add a stroke to that layer, choose color white, and make sure you choose inside for the position, and now you have a nice stroke that you can control the size and color to finish cleaning up that image. And there you go, a nice border, fit to frame, everything's good to go. Now I got one more thing to show you. Here's a common problem. Your bride comes in and says, I love that image, I want an 8:10. And you're like, well, it's gonna have to crop it. No, I don't want to crop anything. I can't crop anything. I want an 8:10 of that image. And you're like, how am I gonna do that? Well, now that you know this little content aware scaling trick, let me show you. So I've gone back in time. All I have now is my image. I've made it a floating layer, just like we did before. I'm going to go to the image size menu and double check that my image width is 8 inches. Okay, because I want to scale it up or down only. So I'll set 8 inches as the width, hit OK, don't touch anything else, and then I'll go to Edit, Content Aware Scale. So I've gone back to my image here. It's just on a layer by itself, floating above everything else. I'm going to make sure that my image is actually 8 inches. And it's 8 inches wide. If it's not, just type in 8, but make sure you're not resampling it. Don't change the height, just the width. 8 inches for a vertical image like this. Then you're going to take your lasso tool, just like we did before. Select her, because you want to protect her. Your knight in shining armor. Go to Select, Save Selection, type in her, enter. Unselect, and then go to Edit, Content Aware Scale, just like before. Choose Protect Her from the menu at top, and now you can bring in your image. And if you look at the top here, right in this area, At the top, there's the dimensions. You can see the size. It's now 10.69, and as you pull it in, that size changes, and you can see it hit right about 10. And notice as I'm doing that again, it's squishing it everywhere except around her. She's protected, but I'm squishing everything else in while still maintaining the information. So it's pretty cool. You can actually type 10 into the box here if you want directly, but it's more fun to push it because you see it squish around and stuff, which I really like. And then we hit enter. And this is actually one of the most complicated things that Photoshop does. It's a very powerful tool. It requires a lot of processing power, and the way I know is it takes a long time to process it. So this is a good time to maybe go and get some coffee, you know, catch up some emails, do whatever you need to do. So I'll get some coffee and it'll be done. Ah, look at that. We're all done. So there you have it, an 8x10 now without having to crop anything off the image. Only thing you want to do now is trim the canvas back down. Here's a quick way to do that. Go to Image, Trim, trim the transparent pixels away, click on OK, and there you go. An 8x10 of the original full frame image with the bride protected, just like every knight in shining armor should do. And that's it for today. Tune in next week to Post Pro, and I'm going to show you how I worked on this image when nature and physics are not on your side. How can you make it work for you and create the image you had in your mind that you really cannot physically capture? So, see you next week.